All right, Shane, so let's kick it over to our interview with Michael Katz from the DJ Journal. Well, we're pleased to be joined once again by a friend of the show, Michael Katz. Give him a follow, Michael L. Katz on the Twitter machine, and he, of course, covers the Ole Miss Rebels for the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal. He's also Paul Feinbaum's favorite Michael. How you doing, brother?
I don't know how many Michaels I'm going against, but I'll take the compliment. I'm doing well. It's crazy that it's already like basically November. If it's I just season just is flying by. I can't believe that we're 7 games in. It's just insane.
Yeah, no doubt. And once again, you're like a damn lucky charm for them Ole Miss Rebels. Last season, of course, the Sugar Bowl, most wins in regular season program history. Now they're off to an even better start, 7-0. Let me ask you this, Michael, because this blew my mind. I heard someone say it earlier in the season that aside from Alabama, aside from Georgia, which everybody recognizes as arguably the best two programs in the country, Ole Miss has got the best record in the SEC the last 2 seasons. Why does this team and this program get the lack of respect, do you think?
I think it's because traditionally Ole Miss has I don't want to say sabotaged itself, but it has sometimes it's hit the highs and then it's gone back down to earth, and people say, oh, that's just Ole Miss. I think people sort of they remember what Ole Miss has been, and they do know the highs, but they also remember the lows, and so I think there's sort of Ole Miss has kind of lacked that consistency over the years, and now that it appears they have it, I think people are still skeptical of how long that can keep going. Is it real? When does the shoe drop? And I don't think that's fair, because I think what Lane Kiffin has done here is pretty remarkable given where the program was a couple years ago. Obviously with Hugh Freeze stuff, the Matt Luke stuff, the turnaround has been pretty remarkable, and especially the way they've done it with the transfers and all that stuff. It is pretty remarkable how we don't think about Ole Miss in that same sort of atmosphere as Alabama and Georgia, and Ole Miss hasn't made the playoff, and that's part of it too. But what they've done is pretty spectacular, and is sort of I think has gotten Ole Miss fans really excited for the first time in a while.
Now, how much confidence do you have after covering this team, traveling with the team on a week in, week out basis? How confident, Michael, are you that Ole Miss can stay atop the SEC West standings by the end of the season? I'm not even saying go undefeated, which you may have to do, but maybe not. What's your confidence level that this team can win the West?
It's going to be really hard, and I think it starts this weekend at LSU, and then the next weekend at Texas A&M. And I think that A&M game maybe isn't what we thought it might be when the year started, but that's still a really hard place to win. And you have to expect they're going to be playing better. And LSU, Ole Miss has played 2 road games this year at Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech, and that had a combined 71,000. There's going to be 100,000+ at Death Valley this year. That's going to be new for this team. And it's a team that you have a lot of guys from a lot of different places, and I don't know if they've all seen this sort of atmosphere yet. And I don't think it's going to overwhelm them or anything, but it is something that is going to be really interesting to see if they get hit in the mouth early, and that place gets as loud as I think it's going to be. Can they, battle back the way they did against Vanderbilt? When you're down 20-17 against Vanderbilt, that's, you can score 28 straight points or whatever it was. It's a little bit different, and it wasn't really a crowd to take out of it. It's going to be a lot harder at LSU. And so I think these 2 games, the Bama game is going to be what it's going to be. I know that Bama fans are kind of in their feelings right now, but that place they're going to be fine. We've seen this before where Saban, they lose 1 game and then they go on the streak and just like never lose again. That's going to be an interesting game here. And then that Arkansas game is going to be a good one too in Fayetteville. I'm shocked, honestly, they beat BYU last week, just kind of given where they had been in the last couple of weeks and how kind of bad their pass defense was. That's going to be a tough place to play. And Ole Miss and Arkansas always play really weird games. And then you got the Egg Bowl, which, State has looked pretty good for the most part. It is here, but, the Egg Bowl, I don't think it really matters where it is to an extent. It's always going to be pretty fairly even for the most part in terms of fans. Though obviously, there'll be more Ole Miss fans there this year, but it's going to be really, really hard. When you looked at the schedule when the season started, 6-0, 6-1, 5-2, something like that seemed kind of where we thought they'd be. Obviously, they have achieved the best they can. And then you looked at the back half and you said, man, is this going to be like 2-3? Is this going to be 3-2? What does that look like? And so I think it's just, I think they're going to do well. I think they're going to win probably around 9 games, but that means that they're going to drop some of these late. And because of that, I don't see it happening. It totally could. Maybe they totally, do what people don't think they can do. But that schedule is about to get really, really brutal.
Have you been able to put your finger on why the defense has taken a little bit of a step back here in recent weeks? Because I thought coming out, the Ole Miss defense was one of the biggest surprises in the entire SEC, in my opinion. Not that they're terrible or anything, but, Auburn, they had a very, very productive day on them. Have you been able to put your finger on why that is?
It's funny because you look at the overall numbers, and I think it's like 17 points per game allowed, which is like pretty good. But you look at the last like 3 games, and not coincidentally, those are the SEC games. The tackling has been really bad. They have missed a lot of plays they were making. And I think part of that is the caliber of player they're seeing now is a lot better than they were seeing against Troy and Central Arkansas and Georgia Tech. No disrespect to them. And I think too, and this is why I think this LSU matchup is really interesting, is Ole Miss, when they have played against mobile quarterbacks this year, they have struggled to stop the running games of those offenses. When they played Tulsa, the backup quarterback came in, and all of a sudden, Tulsa was running the ball all over the place. They had like 260 yards, and they're almost an air raid the way they came into that game. Robbie Ashford at Auburn has struggled as a passer. He runs for 2 touchdowns, and they run for 301 yards, led by Tank Bigsby. And so that type of quarterback, the guy who, even if he isn't getting a ton of yards on his own, who is a threat, that has opened up run games for opposing teams. And that's what Jaden Daniels can do for LSU too. He's their leading rusher. He's got 400 yards and 6 touchdowns. So I think that's going to be, I think, the matchup. If they can't shut that down, it's going to be a really, really long day. And, they can, they practice tackling, they do all that stuff. But I do think that the quarterbacks who can operate in the run game, I think, is where they've really kind of hit a snag.
Do you think Lane has confidence in Jackson Dart to win him a game on the road in the SEC?
I do. Again, it's a very, very different example, but the one game this year where Ole Miss's running game wasn't working was at Vanderbilt. I think they only ran for 110 or whatever it was, and Jackson threw for 448 and 3 touchdowns. And obviously, yes, that's Vanderbilt. It's going to be very different. They came in with a not great pass defense. We know that. But I think, obviously they are going to try to establish the run. And that's what this Ole Miss team does. When you've got running backs like Judkins and Evans and Dart, who, they had all 3 of them ran for 100 yards last week. You're going to try to do that until you absolutely can't. But I do think that this version of Jackson Dart is a lot different than the version we saw against Troy. I think he's a lot more confident. He seems to be in rhythm. He seems to, his receivers have kind of started to emerge. Mingo has had a really nice season. You've got Jordan Watkins and Malik Heath and Dayton Wade last week. They've had guys start to step up. Now, Michael Trigg is not on the depth chart right now. He left that game at Vanderbilt early. That's a big one because he was he was the freak that everybody thought was going to be the superstar, and he'd been a little bit inconsistent. But I do think they trust Dart. I don't think they want to necessarily put the game in his hands. But I think if push came to shove and if it was a close game late and the run game wasn't working, I think they trust him.
Now you hit on the road environment, different, completely different animal here in Tiger Stadium. How well do you think the team will handle this being their first true road test? And maybe more importantly, Michael, does Juice go on the trips with the team?
You know, I only know because Juice's account sometimes tweets bring Juice on the plane or bring Juice on the bus. So I'm assuming he doesn't and he's mad about it. And maybe that's why he eats all the shoes and the binders and gets into all the mischief. You know, it's a cry for help. But this is just going to be so different from what they've been in this year. And I think it was after the Kentucky game, Jackson Dart said, you know, this is the best environment I've ever been in. And Von Hemingway was electric that day, but that's 64,000 people. That there's going to be way more, and they're going to be all against you for the most part in LSU. And I know Jackson has experience in the Pac-12, but I'm a Pac-12 guy at heart. I'm from Southern California. Those stadiums aren't exactly the same. Doesn't matter how full it is. It's a different world. And I know he started games. He's never going to have seen anything like this. And so I do think it's going to be interesting. I don't think they're going to be afraid or anything like that, but I don't know if you know, you can tell the guys and how tough it's going to be, and you can blare the music and the fight song and all that stuff. I don't think you really understand it till you're there.
Now, would you support Lane Kiffin for SEC Coach of the Year at this point in time, or is it you're still kind of in wait and see mode based on how they perform the second half of the season?
I think it's still kind of wait and see. Again, he has done an amazing job. You know, I think everybody is thinking about Josh Heupel right now, just with everything Tennessee has done and what they just did last week in that crazy game, and just, you know, the place they're in right now. But you know, if they keep doing this thing and say they beat Alabama, and you know, maybe they lose one or two games and they have another 10-2 season, with all the turnover they had. Especially, you know, you lose Corral, you lose your three leading running backs, and you bring in all these new guys, and no one was really sure how it was all going to fit together. If you win 10 games, fit together really, really well. And so I do think it's still wait and see, but he's got to be in there just for the way that he has played the you know, the cards that have been dealt in terms of how things work now with the portal and having to sort of recruit in different ways. He's embraced it, and I think that's a big part of the wins and losses are obviously a big part of it, but he has constructed his team the way he's sort of had to, and he hasn't been stubborn about it. And I know a lot of coaches have been outspoken about this sucks and this isn't sustainable. Lane has just done it, and he's done it really, really well. And so I think for all those things, he's definitely going to be in the conversation.
Well, if they're going to beat Alabama, they better plug in the popcorn machine this time around. Final question for you, Michael. Moment of truth here on the road. I'm not putting this out till Thursday, so I don't want to tip your plans for your prediction, but does Ole Miss stay undefeated, or does LSU pull off their first top 10 win of the season?
So unfortunately, the cat is already out of the bag because somebody I turn my picks every Monday, and on like our podcast, someone was like, "And Michael, you chose this." I was like, "Well, dang it, now it's already out there." I think the first loss comes here. I think it's going to be a really, really good game. It's going to be like a 34-31 game. And is it a game Ole Miss could win? Absolutely. I think they're going to play really, really well. I just think that it's just going to be really, really hard. They're going to have to play an almost perfect game, and I think it's hard to play a perfect game at LSU, especially with kind of where, you know, we got this perception of LSU from that Florida State game, like, oh, they're going to be awful. They've turned it around pretty well, other than that Tennessee game. They've looked really, really solid, and so. You know, Brian Kelly's done a nice job there. He was always going to do a good job there. I think they're a little bit ahead of schedule, especially after that first game. I do think LSU wins. Would I be surprised if Ole Miss pulls it off? Absolutely not. But my gut says that this is the first one, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that, you know, you can learn a lot from a loss, and you can rebound, and it's not like it's a lost season or anything like that. But it feels like it's going to be tough.
Mm. Before you go, Michael, can you tell all the folks where to find all your outstanding work?
Yes, you can go. Outstanding is a strong word, but I appreciate the compliment. You can go to djournal.com, click on our Ole Miss tab. You can also follow me on the Twitter machine at Michael L. Katz. I'm on there way too much, as Michael can attest to. I probably need to put down the phone sometimes. But you gotta have fun on there. There's occasionally there's some good content on there too. But you're just gonna see a lot of tweets about me being a sad LA Los Angeles sports fan these days, mixed in with some Ole Miss content. So.
All right, Chase. So, hey, it's not often we got a homer on here that picks his team to lose. Well, he's not. Yep. He's a respected media member. I'm not sitting here saying he's a homer, but pretty interesting stuff. So, thank Michael for joining the show. He's always a good time.